The world of gang leaders is often glorified in movies and TV shows where these individuals are portrayed as powerful, untouchable figures controlling everything from the streets to the highest levels of society. But what happens when these notorious gang leaders end up behind bars? From Whitey Bulger, who secretly worked with the FBI while running a criminal empire, to Michael Torres, a ruthless mobster whose violent rise and fall shocked even his own. The reality of gang leaders in prison is far from glamorous. Even legendary figures like John Gotti couldn't escape the harsh truth, but they are not the only ones. Many others like them found out the hard way that in prison, the consequences are more severe than they ever imagined. Whitey Bulger. Starting with Whitey Bulger. From a young age, Bulger was no stranger to crime. He started off in a street gang called the Shamrocks, where he quickly built a reputation as a tough thief and street fighter. But what exactly led him down this dangerous path? After serving in the military, Bulger returned to Boston, where he began working as a bookmaker and loan shark for mob boss Donald Killeen. Things took a dark turn when Bulger found himself in the middle of a brutal gang war with the rival Mullen Gang. But instead of backing down, Bulger made a bold move. He secretly met with Howie Winter, leader of the Winter Hill Gang, and offered a deal: eliminate Killeen's crew and end the war. The two gangs joined forces, with Winter as the boss, and Bulger quickly rose through the ranks. By the mid-1970s, Bulger took a shocking step. He secretly became an FBI informant. But why? Was he trying to protect himself, or was it all part of his master plan to gain even more power? By betraying his own, he gained valuable information about the rival Patriarcha family, but it also meant he was protected from the law. With the FBI in his corner, Bulger's criminal empire grew. He was involved in everything from extortion to murder, but how did he manage to avoid getting caught for so long? His connections within the FBI, including agents John Morris and John Connolly, kept him one step ahead. In 1995, his secret life as an informant was exposed. He fled Boston with his girlfriend, Catherine Grieg, and disappeared for 16 years. But who tipped off the FBI? Because in 2011, they finally found him in Santa Monica. After being sentenced to life in prison, Bulger's story did not end there. In fact, it took another shocking twist. On October 30th, 2018, just 2 days after being transferred to a West Virginia prison, Bulger was found dead. His death marked the end of his ruthless criminal career. But the leader who once ruled this world of crime probably never imagined that this would be the way his story ended. And while Bulger's empire crumbled, another ruthless figure was rising to power in the criminal world: Michael Torres, aka Masa. Michael Torres. Masa grew up on the rough streets of San Fernando, but how did he go from a small-time thug to the feared leader of the Mexican mafia? In 1994, while locked up in Pelican Bay Prison, Torres caught the eye of Luis Huero Flores, one of the mafia's founders, and was inducted into the dangerous world of the Mexican mafia. After serving 16 years for manslaughter, Torres was released in the early 2000s, but instead of finding redemption, he dove deeper into crime, becoming the mafia's tax collector. He controlled the drug trade and extortion rackets across the San Fernando Valley, taking a cut from every illegal deal. One witness even said, "Masa's got the whole valley. That's all him." But things took a deadly turn in 2003 when Torres shot and killed David Diablo Mendoza, a man pretending to be part of the Mexican mafia. And Torres' violence didn't stop there. He had a gang member named Smokey tortured for informing on Mendoza. Even from behind bars, Torres' influence grew. He controlled the LA County Jail, running illegal activities and collecting money from inmates. So how did Torres' reign come to an end? On July 6, 2023, he was attacked and stabbed by two inmates, Ray Martinez and Juan Angel Martinez, both serving life sentences. And the question raised here, is this the price of power? And just like him, there was another mastermind who was already making his mark on the criminal underworld: Vincent Gigante. Vincent the Chin Gigante is one of the most notorious mob bosses in history. But did you know he started out as a boxer? From 1944 to 1947, Gigante fought in 25 matches, winning 21. But when his boxing career ended, he found a new path: organized crime. As a young man, Gigante became the right-hand man to Vito Genovese, a powerful figure in the mafia. In 1957, Gigante played a key role in a hit that took down mob boss Frank Costello, helping Genovese rise to power. But Gigante wasn't done yet. He had a plan to stay one step ahead of the law. In the 1960s, he started walking around Greenwich Village in a bathrobe and slippers, mumbling to himself. This bizarre behavior, known as the bathrobe defense, tricked the police into thinking he was insane. Gigante eventually became the boss of the Genovese family in the 1980s, but he continued to hide in plain sight. He avoided using phones and even whistled into the receiver to dodge wiretaps. But in 1990, the law caught up with him. After years of legal battles, he was convicted in 1997 and sentenced to 12 years in prison. But even from prison, Gigante continued to pull the strings of the Genovese family, proving that even behind bars, a powerful mob boss can still control a criminal empire. His son, Andrew, would visit him regularly, passing along orders to keep the operations running smoothly, which shows that while they may lose their freedom, their influence often doesn't fade. But then in 2005, Gigante finally died. And it wasn't just the end of his life, it marked the end of an era for the Genovese crime family. John Gotti. Next in line is John Gotti. Once the most feared mob boss in America, started his criminal career as a kid. By 12, he was already involved in street gangs, eventually rising to power in the Gambino crime family. His reputation grew with major crimes like the 1978 Lufthansa heist, and by the mid-1980s, he orchestrated the murder of his boss, Paul Castellano, to take over the family. Known as the Dapper Don for his sharp style and the Teflon Don for his ability to dodge conviction, Gotti seemed untouchable. But no matter how hard he tried to stay out of the law's reach, the FBI was relentless. In 1990, Gotti was arrested, and in 1992, he was convicted of murder and racketeering, sentenced to life without parole. But what happened behind bars? Life in prison wasn't glamorous for Gotti. He faced isolation, harsh conditions, and his health deteriorated. Even with throat cancer, he tried to maintain control over the Gambino family, but his influence was slipping. In 2002, Gotti died in prison. But did his death really signal the end of his power? Was it a natural death, or did it pave the way for new leadership? The reality for gang leaders in prison isn't what many imagine. What do you think? And maybe the next leader's story will help us find this answer. Jaime Valdez. Jaime Valdez, known by his stage name Money Sign Suede, was on his way to becoming a big name in the LA rap scene. He signed with Atlantic Records in 2021, and his album Parkside Baby was a hit. But his bright future took a tragic turn. In December 2022, Valdez was sentenced to over 3 years in prison for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Valdez was sent to the Soledad Correctional Training Facility, a minimum to medium security prison. Even though the facility wasn't as dangerous as others, prison life can still be tough. On April 25, 2023, things took a turn for the worse. Valdez was found unresponsive in the shower, stabbed in the neck. He was pronounced dead shortly after. His death shocked everyone, but what led to this brutal attack? Many inmates in prison are involved in gangs, and it's possible Valdez was targeted because of his ties to one. But whatever the reason, it marked the end for him. TJ Lane. The name still sends chills through anyone who remembers this tragic Chardon High School shooting in 2012. But what drove this quiet teenager from Chardon, Ohio, to commit such a horrifying act? And what's life like for him now behind bars? Lane's story begins with a troubled background. He was a loner, struggling to fit in, and came from a broken home full of conflict. He kept his anger bottled up, but on February 27, 2012, it exploded in the worst way possible. Armed with a .22 caliber handgun, Lane walked into Chardon's high school cafeteria and opened fire on his classmates. 3 innocent students, Demetrius Hulin, Russell King Jr., and Nick Walczyk, lost their lives, while others were seriously injured. Lane later said he didn't target anyone specific, he just wanted to unleash his rage onto the world. Now Lane is locked away for life, and prison isn't anything like the twisted fantasies he might have had. Behind those cold, gray walls, inmates have their own rules. Hurting kids? That's a crime that makes you the lowest of the low. Lane isn't respected. He's hated. He's not feared. He's a target. But Lane didn't quietly accept his fate. In 2014, he made a daring escape with 2 other inmates, slipping out of the prison under the cover of night. He was on the run for 6 hours before being caught, but that short taste of freedom came with a price. Now he's even more isolated and watched like a hawk. Today, TJ Lane's life is a far cry from the control he once thought he had. He lives in constant danger, surrounded by people who despise him, carrying the weight of his crimes every single day. Nicholas Lindsay. Until now, one thing is clear. When you think of gang leaders, images of power, intimidation, and control might come to mind. But behind bars, the reality is quite different. Moving to another leader, Nicholas Lindsay, a young man who once walked the streets of St. Petersburg, Florida, with a reputation to uphold. At just 16, Nicholas made a decision that would not only end a life, but would also change his forever. On February 21, 2011, Nicholas shot and killed Officer David Crawford, a veteran of the St. Petersburg Police Department. The officer was simply reaching for his notepad when Nicholas pulled the trigger 5 times. The crime sent shockwaves through the community and triggered a massive manhunt. By the next night, Nicholas was arrested, breaking down in tears as he confessed to the crime. But here's where the story takes a turn. Nicholas was no seasoned criminal mastermind. Despite his tough persona on the streets, his IQ scores ranged between 77 and 86, and he was known to be easily influenced. In prison, where gang leaders lose their outside reputation, it's not about bravado anymore, it's about survival, often in ways they never imagined. Nicholas, once someone who aimed to impress peers, now faces a lifetime behind bars, where status means little and every day is a test of resilience. Stripped of the power he once sought, he's left to face the harsh reality of his choices. For Nicholas Lindsay, his life now serves as a sobering reminder of how a single decision can dismantle everything, leaving behind nothing but regret and the cold walls of a cell. James Fairweather. Next in line is a 15-year-old boy who seemed like an ordinary schoolboy, but behind that innocent facade lurked a mind twisted by violence. James Fairweather didn't just become a murderer, he became a nightmare. His crimes shocked an entire nation, leaving scars that still haunt his town. Back in 2014, James unleashed a reign of terror in Colchester, Essex, targeting random victims with unimaginable brutality. His first victim, James Atfield, a father of 5 with a brain injury, was stabbed over 100 times. Yes, you heard that right, 100 times. This wasn't just a crime, it was a frenzy. Fairweather later claimed he heard voices laughing as he attacked. But he didn't stop there. Just 3 months later, he ambushed Nahid Almania, a Saudi student. The attack was horrifying. He stabbed her multiple times, even targeting her eyes, claiming he wanted her to not see evil. For nearly a year, the entire town was gripped with fear. Fairweather stayed under the radar until a sharp-eyed dog walker spotted him loitering, knife in hand, gloves ready for another kill. That call to the police ended his spree. When Fairweather entered prison, reality hit hard. This wasn't his turf anymore. Among hardened criminals and gang leaders, Fairweather's gruesome acts painted a target on his back. Prison is no place for the weak, and even the most fearsome killers know the code. Fairweather's young age and heinous crimes didn't earn him respect, they earned him enemies. Now locked away for life with a minimum of 27 years, he's not just paying for his crimes. He's facing the harsh reality of life behind bars. Zachary Davis. And just like him, here's another one, a 15-year-old who crossed a line so dark that it lands you in prison for life. That's the story of Zachary Davis, a Tennessee teenager who brutally killed his mother with a sledgehammer in 2012. But how does a young mind capable of such horror adapt to the unforgiving world of prison? Zachary didn't just get a life sentence for murder, he was handed an extra 20 years for attempted murder and arson after setting his house on fire with his brother inside. The judge called him evil, saying Zach had embraced the dark side. But here's the twist. Zach showed no remorse. In his eerie, monotone voice, he told Dr. Phil, "I wanted to make sure she was dead." Prison isn't kind to those like Zach. At 17, with a sentence stretching beyond 70 years, he was thrown into a system where gang leaders, seasoned criminals, and hardened survivors rule the yard. His flat emotions and chilling statements like, "I didn't feel anything when I killed her," may have kept him detached on the outside, but inside prison walls, detachment can make you prey or predator. The terrifying part? Zach isn't your typical gangster wannabe. He's the quiet storm. The kid who reads books about torture and played violent video games alone. But prison has a way of stripping you down and reshaping you. It's a place where manipulation, alliances, and raw survival dominate, and where people like Zach face their true selves or get consumed by the system. Tyler Hadley. Last but not least, imagine what's going on in the mind of a teenager who killed his own parents with a hammer, then threw a party with their bodies still inside the house. This horrific reality is Tyler Hadley's story. At just 17, Tyler turned his parents' Port Lucie home into the site of a horrifying crime scene. The reason? He believed killing them would set him free. Free from what? We'll never know for sure. After bludgeoning his parents to death, Tyler invited his friends over for a house party, acting like nothing was wrong. Guests danced, laughed, and trashed the place, clueless about the grim secret lying just behind a locked door upstairs. Even more shocking, Tyler bragged to a friend about what he'd done, leaving his friend so stunned they didn't believe it until they saw the bodies for themselves. Fast forward to today. Tyler Hadley, now 30, sits behind bars at the Century Correctional Institute in Florida, a once cocky teen with dreams of living life his way. Tyler now faces the harsh reality of prison life. Gang leaders and hardened criminals don't care about his teenage rage story. Behind those walls, Tyler is no longer the host of a house party, he's just another inmate trying to survive in a brutal hierarchy. Tyler may have thought he'd gain freedom by committing the unthinkable, but instead, he traded one prison for another. Now his life revolves around strict routines, isolation, and the haunting memories of his own actions. And that wraps up our list of the reality of 10 gang leaders in prison. Thank you for watching. If you want to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel.